Welcome back. Now it's time for our last presentation of the morning. Business tax refunds.
Hello, my name is Justin Smith, and I'm a business tax specialist in the business tax division. And today I'll be presenting with Cheryl Lauer, and we will be covering business tax refunds. So this slide right here shows the taxes that we'll actually be covering. I will be covering specifically the Commercial Activity Tax, Financial Institutions Tax, Municipal Net Profit Tax, the Petroleum Activity Tax, and Wireless 911. So just to set the agenda for this presentation on refunds, I'll do a kind of a quick background on the Buckeye refund, kind of how this whole process started of the department notifying taxpayers of overpayments. I'll then get into Senate Bill 263, which is the actual legislation. Some of the common reasons why overpayments actually exist, how to file a refund claim, the refund claim review process, the refund claim appeal process, and then how to sign up for tax alerts. So I'll give you the history on how this kind of started. In 2014, the tax commissioner ordered a review of all computer systems to identify any overpayments across multiple tax types. Then Governor Casey instructed the department to refund overpayments that were within the statute of limitations, and then audit any returns to identify any potential overpayments, which led to Senate Bill 263. So the department proposed legislation to the General Assembly, and it was passed on September 17th, 2014. And it required us to, at least 60 days before the expiration of the statute, to notify taxpayers of any overpayments or any credits that they may be entitled to. Part of that was that the credit balance could be applied against liability in the next reporting period. That only applies for certain taxes, or be refunded back to the taxpayer. And part of this process also allowed for the refund to be offset to any other taxes where a business may owe liabilities or any debt to the Ohio Attorney General's office. So this will just give kind of a before and an after. So before Senate Bill 263, taxpayers were required to file a refund claim. So if the claim was never submitted, the payment would just go out of statute and never be refunded back to the taxpayer. After Senate Bill 263, the department would notify taxpayers of any overpayments. And kind of the way it works is that we'll do periodic sweeps of overpayments for different tax types and send out letters that'll have, the tax type, the amount that is potentially overpaid, and the period for which it's overpaid. Taxpayer can fill that out and send it back in. Some taxes refunds will be issued. We'll also take into consideration any offsets. That's for any debt, for any other type of tax that's owed to the Department of Taxation, along with any debt possibly to the Ohio Attorney General's office. So I'll cover just a kind of some of the more common reasons why overpayments exist. Amended returns, tax miscalculations, duplicate payments, tax credits, overestimated payments, and overestimated or overpaid assessments. These would be the non-certified overpaid assessments. So first I will start with the Commercial Activity Tax, just because it's, out of all the taxes that I'm going to cover, it's probably the one that we receive the most requests on, just because the tax base is larger than FIT or PAT or Wireless 911 or, at this point, Municipal Net Profit. So we'll start with actually how to file a CAT refund claim. You can complete and submit the form CAT REF. This can be submitted by paper, or for CAT, the refund claim can actually be completed on Ohio Business Gateway. There's a separate option in there. When a business logs in, they can go to the Cap Refund claim. They'd fill out, I think the required information is the amount that you're requesting, the reason that you're think that you're overpaid or you're requesting a refund. And then you can actually upload any supporting documentation to that claim online with, it'll list our supported documents that you can actually upload. And if you need to fill out the paper form, that's available on tax.ohio.gov under the forms section. Some of the common supporting documentation that we ask for commercial activity tax: state-by-state sales breakdown, copies of any contracts. That one really comes into play where a refund claim is submitted, typically claiming agency relationship. We almost always request copies of the contracts to review to verify that there actually is an agency relationship. Proof of payment, so copy of a canceled check, bank statement, ACH debit or ACH credit transactions, invoices, copy of any tax credit certificates, and if you're claiming a tax credit, you have to fill out the CAT CS form, which is the credit schedule. So I will go over a couple just common CAT refund scenarios. We'll start with an original or an amended return filed to claim a tax credit. So in this case, business would be required to fill out the CAT REF. If they're claiming either a refundable or a non-refundable credit on the actual return, they have to submit the CAT CS form and a copy of a tax credit certificate if it's issued by the Ohio Development Services Agency. I believe that's typically for refundable credits. And specifically for the qualified research expense credit, we require a copy of the federal form 6765 along with the address where the qualified research was conducted. So also when you're filing these original or amended returns on Ohio Business Gateway and you claim one of these credits, you actually have to put it on the form, the actual tax form, as a non-refundable or refundable credit. And at the end of that process, you'll be presented with the option to either upload the CAT CS form along with any supporting documents, or you can choose to mail it, but you actually have to choose one of the options, whether you're actually going to upload or send it in by paper. The next one I'll cover here: amended return filed to exclude out-of-state sales reported on the original. So this example, it's typically a business will file a CAT return and they'll report their taxable gross receipts or their sales nationwide, as opposed to just the receipts that are sourced to Ohio. So they'll come back in, they'll file an amended return, thus creating a credit because they overpaid originally. They submit the refund form. Typically on these type of requests, we require a breakdown of sales state by state. So when we mean state by state, we want to see every state laid out and the amount of gross receipts to tie that to the original return. And then we'll be able to verify what the Ohio receipts are and tie that number to the amended return. We would request that these be submitted in electronic file format as opposed to sending us paper, just because the volume. We may also request a sample of invoices to show the ultimate delivery location of the product, to show that it was actually could actually be sourced to another state outside of Ohio. Cover a couple more of the common CAT refund scenarios. So the top one there, overpaid assessments. So typically this happens when the department will issue, let's say, a delinquency notice. Taxpayer fails to respond to the actual original billing. We assess them, and we assess them at a higher amount than what they actually owed. Taxpayer will just pay off the estimated assessment without actually filing the return to comply with the delinquency notice. Taxpayer then comes back in and files the return and actually owes less than our estimate, created an overpayment. So a business in that case, they may actually receive a corrected assessment showing the amount that's overpaid, and then also be issued a refund after paying off the tax, the penalty, and the interest. The next scenario there, if a taxpayer remits a payment to the Ohio Attorney General's office, the refund is actually issued from the Ohio Attorney General's office, not the Department of Taxation. A taxpayer can actually submit the claim to the Ohio Department of Taxation. It'll actually be officially denied by the Ohio Department of Taxation, and the agent working that claim would then send a request to the Ohio Attorney General's office to have them issue the refund. But a taxpayer would actually receive a denial letter from the department, and then the refund would come from the Ohio Attorney General's office. The next one, the rule reconciliation. So this only applies to taxpayers that actually file the rule estimate return. There are safe harbors around that, which allows a taxpayer to actually file estimated figures if they don't have their original ones available. So sometimes what they'll do is businesses will overpay on the estimate to avoid being charged any interest if they don't meet the safe harbor, which then creates an overpayment when they file the reconciliation. This can be requested. You can request a refund back on this, or it can stay on that quarter and be used for the next period's liability. The final one there, the statutory reconciliation. Again, this only applies to taxpayers that file the statutory estimate return, which is where the first 3 quarters or even one of the quarters of the calendar year, you file an estimated return, a statutory estimate, which would then require you to file a statutory reconciliation for the 4th quarter. And when you true up those figures on the reconciliation form, it may result in an overpayment, which you can then request a refund on. Or you could leave it there and apply it to the next quarter. A couple other common Cap refund scenarios. So the top one here, the annual minimum tax. I would say this is probably the most common refund claim that we receive for CAT. So if a taxpayer reports $150,000 or less in a calendar year, they'd actually be entitled to a refund of the annual minimum tax. This is saying that they actually paid it. And I just want to make a note there where it says CET and PITT. So the CET stands for a Consolidated Elected Taxpayer, and the PITT stands for Pre-Income Tax Trust. So if a taxpayer elects either one of those options, they're not entitled to a refund, even if the gross receipts are $150,000 or less in a calendar year. It's part of the the deal when you sign up to be treated as a consolidated taxpayer or a PITT. You're always required to at least pay the minimum tax, and you would not be entitled to a refund, even if your receipts are less than $150,000. So I'm going to give an example here of an invalid AMT refund claim, just because we receive a lot of these. So a business reports $5 million in total taxable gross receipts in 2016. Pays an AMT of $2,600 in 2017. If they're quarterly, they'd pay that on the 1st quarter. The business then reports $1.5 million in total taxable gross receipts in 2017. The business is not entitled to a refund because their total taxable gross receipts have decreased. The AMT would simply be reduced for 2018 to $800. So typically we would receive a refund request, let's say for the difference of the $2,600 and the $800. So we'd receive a refund request for $1,800, which will end up being denied because we simply adjust the AMT for 2018. Really the only way that they'd be entitled to a refund is if the receipts actually went below $150,000. So hopefully that'll clarify the AMT refund part of it before some of these claims that are they get submitted and ultimately denied. So I will stop for a test your knowledge. So true or false, a consolidated elected taxpayer group is entitled to a refund of the annual minimum tax if their taxable gross receipts are $150,000 or less in a calendar year. And the answer to that is false. I covered that in the previous slide, that if you elect to be treated as a consolidated elected taxpayer, you're not entitled to a refund of the annual minimum tax, even if your receipts are below $150,000. So I will pause for the code word. The code word is refund. And now I will move on to some of the lesser known or smaller taxpayer base taxes. I will start with the financial institutions tax. So this one works a little differently than the CAT refund claim does. So the first, actually how to file a refund claim. There is a FIT REF form. That's a paper form that has to be submitted. For FIT, you cannot file a refund claim electronically on Ohio Business Gateway. You actually have to submit the paper form. However, if an overpayment is on the original return, a claim is automatically created. Actually, on the return, it'll show a credit balance or an overpayment on the actual original return. In that case, business doesn't have to submit the refund claim form. We only require the refund claim for an amended return. So when they file an original return, create an overpayment, the claim is automatically created here, and it's assigned to an agent to work, and then the business would receive a refund. If we have any questions, we'll reach out to the business regarding that overpayment. Some of the common supporting documentation for a FIT refund claim, and this is probably true across all tax types, is proof of payment, tax credit certificates if they're actually claiming one of the credits. And if they claim one of those credits on the return, they're required to submit the FIT CS form. So I will go over a couple of the common FIT refund scenarios. So an original or amended return filed to claim a tax credit. So any time a tax credit is claimed, we're going to require the refund request form, the credit schedule, a copy of the tax credit certificate issued by DSA, and again for FIT, if you're claiming the qualified research expense credit, we're going to require the federal form 6765 along with the address where the qualified research was actually conducted. The bottom one there, overpaid estimated payments. So again, if the overpayments on an original return, we're not going to actually request the refund claim form. We're only requesting that on the amended return. And typically in this scenario, the way that they actually happen is FIT has safe harbor percentages where you're required to remit either 100% of last year's tax or 90% of the current year. So typically a business will try to hit the 100% of the previous year and make their estimated payments based on that. So then when they file their returns in October, they actually end up overpaid because they overpaid their estimated payments that are due January, March, and May, resulting in an overpayment. So next I will move on to the Municipal Net Profit Tax. So how to file an actual refund claim. This one is similar to FIT, so if the overpayment is on the original return, the claim is automatically created and assigned to an agent to work. And if there's any questions, again, we'll reach out regarding that overpayment. However, if the overpayment is the result of an amended return, we're going to require the refund request form that can be found on the website. So we'll go over a couple common supporting documentation for a municipal net profit tax. Before I get into that, I want to make this clear. This is only for businesses that have opted in with the Department of Taxation to file municipal net profit tax. If you have not opted in, please do not send the refund claim forms to us. So back to the common supporting documentation. As with all the other taxes, proof of payment would be required to show that the business actually remitted those payments, canceled checks, bank statements, tax credit certificates / agreements. And if you're claiming one of the tax credits, you'd be required to fill out the credit schedule. So I'll run over a couple of the common municipal net profit refund scenarios. So we can have an original or an amended return to claim a tax credit. Same as FIT, we require the refund claim form along with the credit schedule, and then a copy of the tax credit certificate or agreement that's actually issued by the municipality. So if they're claiming those types of credits, they're required to send a copy of those certificates along with it. So overpaid estimated payments, this scenario I think would follow the same as FIT. So if they make their estimated payments based upon their actual fiscal year, they could end up overpaid on the original return, which automatically creates a claim. No refund request form required. However, if an overpayment is the result of an amended return, you have to submit the actual refund claim form. Another common one, duplicate payment. So typically this is the result of, I think the most common ones we see is if you have one person who's authorized to file and pay. Typically this is through the gateway. Someone will come in the business, they'll file and they'll pay. And maybe someone else in the company is authorized to make payments. They don't know that the other person already paid, and they'll come in and submit another payment. Or the business actually remits a payment and their accountant will submit another payment on their behalf, not knowing that the business already paid. So typically on those ones, we'll just require proof of payment and a refund request form. A couple other common municipal net profit tax refund scenarios. Misapplied payments. So the payment was submitted to the Department of Taxation when it was intended to go to another tax. So for example, let's say a business submitted a municipal net profit tax payment to us. They've opted in. They remitted the payment to us. However, it was supposed to go to their sales tax account or withholding or commercial activity tax. The way this is actually going to work, the business would be required to submit a refund request form, and we would not be able to take that payment and apply it to any other taxes. So the business has to submit the form. We'd issue the refund back to the business, and then they would have to pay the other tax types that are owed, commercial activity tax or withholding or sales tax. We would not be able to take that payment and apply it to any other taxes. The last one here, amended returns. So they may be required to provide proof of payment, the credit schedule form. If they're claiming any tax credits, we will also be able to verify some federal information here at the Department of Taxation. And next I will move on to the Petroleum Activity Tax. So how to file an actual PAT claim. You have to complete and submit the PAT REF form. So some of the common supporting documentation for a PAT claim would be proof of payment again, the CS form if you're claiming a tax credit, copies of any credit certificates, invoices, and specifically for PAT, BOL, bill of lading, and if possible, the Fuel Track USA documents. So I'll go into the couple of common PAT refund scenarios. So PAT was previously paid by the supplier, but it reported by the taxpayers. So when we receive this type of claim, we request a list of all transactions for the period, purchases, and sales. And when we say list of all transactions, it actually means a list of all transactions for that time period which they're claiming a refund. Copies of our actual invoices and bill of lading. Another common PAC refund scenario, the diverted gallons. So this is one where it was originally intended for Ohio, but it's been diverted to another state. So we request the bill of lading and the Fuel Track USA documents. We'd really like if they could submit the Fuel Track USA documents if possible, just because it has all the pertinent information for us to verify that the gallons have been diverted from Ohio to another state. The last one here, the overpayment of the license fee. So I think typically on this one, there's two main reasons for this. Let's say a business doesn't pay their license renewal. So the fees can be $1,000 or $300. So if we don't have one on file, we'll automatically charge the maximum $1,000. And then the business may come back and say that they only owed the $300 for an importer, and they had overpaid that license fee. They'd be issued back a refund of the difference of $700. The other most common one is the start date of September 1st or after. So for Petroleum Activity Tax, if you have a start date of 9/1 or after, the first license fee is prorated. So it can either be $500 or $150. So typically the business will remit the full amount, not knowing that the code actually allows for a prorated fee for that first year. So then we'll issue back a refund of, let's say either the $500 or $150. A couple other common PAC refund scenarios. So an original or amended return filed to claim a tax credit, and this is pretty much the same across all the taxes that I've covered. If you're claiming a tax credit, you're required to actually claim it on the form, the actual tax return. Submit the refund claim, and the credit schedule, along with the tax credit certificate issued by DSA. So on these types of claims, it's just important to note that if you need to send all these required documents, if we have to reach out and request one of these three forms here or information, it delays the refund process. So the final one that I'll be covering is probably the least known of the taxes that I've covered today, wireless 911. So how to actually file a refund claim for wireless 911. There's a form on tax.ohio.gov. Complete the form and submit it. So I think this is the same as FIT. If an overpayment is on an original return, the claim is actually automatically created and assigned to an agent. If an amended return is filed, you're required to submit the form. Some of the common supporting documentation is proof of payment. I guess typically on these, the most common reason why someone would be overpaid for wireless 911 is that they registered an error or they remitted a duplicate payment. So I will also just do a quick rundown of the tax credits, since I mentioned it across all the tax types that I covered except for wireless 911. So these are the credits that can be applied on those taxes. You can see the revised code section, the resources at the end of the presentation. So the refundable credits, jobs creation, Ohio motion picture, the new markets tax credit. So if I have something in parentheses here, that means it only applies to that tax specifically. So the new markets one only applies to financial institutions. The top ones there, the refundable credits, those require a copy of the certificate from DSA. Typically how those work is the credit is actually claimed on the return based upon the signature date on the actual certificate. The next one here, the non-refundable credits, qualified research and expense, and the R&D loan payments. That one only applies to CAT. The bottom one here, the credits that are both refundable and can be both refundable and non-refundable. Jobs retention, it should say on the certificate, either how much is refundable or if it's a non-refundable credit. The Ohio Historic Preservation can be both. I won't really get into a whole lot of detail on that. You can read the credit schedule, but part of it, there has a threshold of how much can actually be refunded, and then once that threshold is met, then it becomes non-refundable. And then the NOL, so I know for this, it's just for CAT, it doesn't become refundable until tax year 2030. Up until that point, it's a non-refundable credit. So, test your knowledge. So if a business user claims a tax credit on a CAT, FIT, PAP, or MNP return, what taxation form must be submitted as supporting documentation? And that is the credit schedule, the CS form. It can be found at tax.ohio.gov. It also can be found when you're filing the return on Ohio Business Gateway. If you claim one of those credits, you're prompted to the PDF of the CS form, which then you can upload with the actual return. Outside of that, then you have to choose to mail it. You have to choose one of the two options when you're filing on the gateway and you're claiming one of these credits. At this point, I will turn it over to Cheryl to cover sales tax.
We'll pause for another moment. The code word, the last code word of the day, is credits. My name is Cheryl Lauer, and I'm a tax examiner manager in our audit division. And today I'd like to present information on sales and use tax refunds. First thing to discuss is, why do sales and use tax overpayments exist? Our most common reasons for sales or use tax overpayments are due to the filing of an amended return, where the taxpayer is correcting an error made on their originally filed return. That error could be due to a taxability issue, or it could be due to a tax miscalculation. Another common reason is when duplicate payments are made for the same reporting period. We see sales and use tax overpayments made on motor vehicle claims, or the taxpayer may simply overlook the accelerated payment when they file their original return, which creates an overpayment. A sales or use tax refund claim is filed by completing the STAR form. So this STAR form is available for download on our website at tax.ohio.gov. Simply click Forms and type in STAR in the search box. To start the refund claim process, the STAR form must be mailed into the department along with the appropriate supporting documentation for the refund claim type. If the taxpayer has a credit on their account, the department does issue an unrequested refund letter, and that letter can serve as a substitute for the submission of the STAR form. Whether the taxpayer is responding to that letter or they're submitting the STAR form, they need to be sure to include the appropriate documentation for the refund claim type, and that must be submitted by mail. Another thing to consider when filing a refund is the statute date. So for business taxes, the refund statute date is 4 years from the date of the overpayment. The only exception to this is the MNP tax, which is 3 years from the date of the overpayment. We determine the statute date based upon the postmark date on the envelope that you use to mail in your refund claim. It's very important when you're submitting a sales or use tax refund claim that you do include the appropriate supporting documentation. By having the correct documentation initially, that will allow us to expedite the processing of your refund claim. Depending on the refund claim type, that documentation may include copies of original invoices. It may be a spreadsheet listing transactions, which I'll talk about more on that topic in the next slide. It may be a county by county sales breakdown. We could ask for a copy of a contract that's pertinent to your refund claim. We may also request proof of payment. Proof of payment can be a canceled check. It can be a bank statement. It may be an accounts payable statement or an ACH EFT transaction list. An electronic transaction listing. The department does require that if your refund claim has 25 or greater transactions, that data be submitted electronically. Our preference is an Excel format or a Microsoft compatible spreadsheet format, and that data can be loaded on a USB drive or a CD and be mailed in with your refund claim. The spreadsheet itself should contain all of the data that's listed on the schedule of supporting documents. That's shown on your screen there. Additionally, each transaction needs to be listed individually. The total sum of all of those transactions should match what's on your refund claim. So the schedule of supporting documents is on page 3 of the STARC form. And the information that's listed there is everything that we do need to process the refund claim. Oftentimes, taxpayers will submit spreadsheets that contain a lot of additional information other than what's listed on the screen. That greatly slows down our refund review process. We also have taxpayers who will submit a spreadsheet where the column headers aren't appropriately labeled, or maybe there's not enough information in the column headers. When this happens, we do reach out to the taxpayer to get an explanation. And again, that does slow down the refund review process. Now let's review the specific documentation that's required for the various refund claim types. The first type is a vendor-filed refund claim. Probably our most common vendor-filed refund claim is for a taxability issue. For example, an exemption certificate is received from a consumer after the vendor has filed their original sales tax return. When this is the case, in addition to the STAR form, we'll also request copies of the original invoices. We'll ask for a copy of the credit memo or some other type of documentation showing that accounts receivable has been refunded to the customer for the tax paid. We'll also request a transaction listing. Again, if this is 24 or less transactions, that can be submitted by paper on the schedule of supporting documents. If it's 25 or greater transactions, we'll need that in a spreadsheet format. We'll also need a copy of the exemption certificate or a letter of usage that explains why the item is being deemed exempt. A vendor sales tax refund claim could also be received for an amendment to an original return, simply correcting an error that was on the original return. For these types of claims, we will request documentation to verify the figures for both the original and the amended filings. So in addition to the STAR form, that proof or the additional documentation can be cash register receipts, it may be sales journals, a summary report. What we're looking for is any type of documentation that the taxpayer has used to determine the figures listed on the original and the amended return for the entire refund period. A common use tax refund claim is due to taxability. For example, use tax was paid on an item that was later deemed exempt. When this is the case, in addition to the STAR form, the taxpayer needs to submit copies of their original purchase invoices. We'll need a complete listing of use tax accruals for the entire refund period. We also require a reason as to why the items are being deemed exempt. Oftentimes, for the reason, the taxpayer will simply cite a section of the ORC code. That doesn't allow us to process the refund claim. What we're looking for is a detailed and specific explanation for why that item is being deemed exempt. A consumer also has the option to file a refund claim directly with the Department of Taxation as opposed to going to the vendor for that refund. In addition to the STAR form, the consumer will need to submit copies of invoices or receipts. They will also need to submit proof of payment. Again, that can be a canceled check, be a copy of a bank statement, an EFT transaction listing. I'd like to mention here that we will require copies of all invoices for the canceled check that was submitted. So for example, the taxpayer provided a canceled check as proof of payment, and that invoice was payment for, or that check was payment for 10 invoices. Only 5 of those invoices are included in the refund claim. We will ask for copies of all 10 invoices. That will allow us to prove that payment was made in full for both the product and the sales tax. We'll also need a reason as to why the items are being deemed exempt. And again, simply citing ORC code won't allow us to process the refund claim. A purchaser who holds a direct pay permit and pays sales tax to a vendor in error, they also have the option to submit a refund claim with the department. Test your knowledge. What form is available at tax.ohio.gov to help taxpayers determine what supporting documentation is required for a sales and use tax refund application? The answer, that would be the STARC form. That form contains a checklist for both vendor filed returns and also consumer filed returns. There are also checklists for motor vehicle refund claims. Great. Let's move on to common mistakes and misconceptions when filing a refund claim. Probably the most important mistake or misconception that's made when filing a refund claim has to do with statute. So again, the statute for a business refund claim is 4 years from the date of the overpayment, the exception being the MNP tax, which is 3 years from the date of the overpayment. When you file an amended return that results in an overpayment, that will not preserve statute. In other words, when you file an amended return that creates an overpayment, we're going to look at the original payment date to determine the statute date. You want to make sure if you run into this scenario that a refund claim is filed as soon as possible. If you're in the process of an audit and you've signed a waiver of the statute of limitations, that same waiver period will also apply to the refund period on your refund claim. We receive a lot of incomplete refund applications. Possibly there's no signature, the federal employer identification number hasn't been included, the refund period isn't listed, or a reason hasn't been provided as to why the refund is being requested. We do strongly encourage you to submit a complete STAR form. When we receive these incomplete applications, we will contact the taxpayer and attempt to get that information. Typically, that's a phone call or an email. If we don't receive a response from a taxpayer, we will mail the application back. As we've mentioned before, lack of supporting documentation being mailed in with a STAR form will delay the processing of the refund application. If you have any questions about what needs to be submitted with the STAR form, please download the STARC form from our website for additional information. You can also call our Taxpayer Services business line, and they'll be happy to help you with those questions also. If you are filing a sales or use tax refund claim and you're coming up against the statute date, I strongly encourage you to consider submitting your application with the entire amount of supporting documentation. So you're coming up against statute and you're only able to find 50% of the supporting documentation. We are working to expedite the refund process, and as part of that, when we do receive those refund claims without all the documentation, we'll reach out to the taxpayer. They will be given a deadline to provide that additional information to us. If the deadline isn't met, we will deny the claim. What happens from there is that the taxpayer only has 60 days to respond with the entire amount of the additional documentation. So if you're up against the statute date, please consider not filing the refund claim unless you have all the documentation required. Okay. If you are a tax representative, please be sure that your client submits a copy of the TBOR-1 with their STAR form. Obviously, if we don't have a copy of the TBOR-1, we're unable to discuss the refund claim or the refund tax, or the refund results with you. Okay. Oftentimes, taxpayers will submit an outdated STAR form that requests a credit transfer. The department will no longer honor this request for sales and use tax refund claims. An updated STAR form is available on our website for download. When we receive these outdated STAR forms, we will contact the taxpayer. We'll notify them that we can't honor their request for the credit transfer to a future reporting period, and we will process the STAR form, but they will receive a copy of a paper check. Okay, the refund claim review process. The first thing we do when we receive a refund claim is we stamp that with the postmark date. Again, that postmark date is used to determine statute date. Your refund claim will be assigned to an examiner or an agent. They'll review the claim for validity and to verify that there's appropriate documentation. If there isn't, we'll reach out to the taxpayer, usually by phone and then by email, to try to gather that additional documentation. If additional documentation isn't provided by the deadline, we will go ahead and deny the refund claim. Those claims that we are able to process for FIT and wireless 911, it takes us approximately 4 to 6 weeks after the date of receipt to process those refund claims. For CAT, PAT, and sales and use tax, it currently takes us around 8 to 12 weeks. The reason for that is the volume of the claims that we receive. Additionally, the documentation that is received for CAT, PAT, and sales and use tax is generally much more difficult to review, and it contains more information than the smaller taxes. If you're in the process of a business audit or you have recently been through a business audit, your refund claim may be sent up to the audit division. The reason for this is that oftentimes the refund results will be incorporated into your audit. Okay, refund claims can be approved in full, partially approved, or denied. If they're approved in full, the taxpayer will receive tax plus interest. If they are approved in part or denied in full, the taxpayer is going to receive tax plus interest on the approved portion. They'll also receive a denial or a partial approval letter. If the taxpayer is granted a full refund or a part paid refund, the department is going to look at their other tax debt to determine if there's any outstanding on other tax accounts. We will offset your refund with the amount of tax debt that we are able to locate. Taxpayers do not have appeal rights for refunds that were fully approved but subsequently offset. True or false? The applicant should include interest in the total amount of the refund claimed on the STAR form. This is false. After we determine the refund results, we will calculate the interest based upon that amount. The refund claim appeal process. The taxpayer does have 60 days from the date that they receive the denial or part paid letter to respond with additional documentation and or to request a hearing. If a hearing is requested, the refund will be assigned to an attorney. They will contact you with your hearing date. You do have the option to hold that hearing over the phone, or you can attend in person. After the hearing is held, the taxpayer will be issued a final determination on the refund claim. If the taxpayer responds to the 60-day letter with documentation and they do not request a hearing, your documentation will be provided to an auditor or an agent to review. They will process the additional documentation, issue an additional refund if that's warranted, and ultimately a final determination will be issued. If there's no response to that 60-day letter, the claim is denied in full and considered final. If you do request a hearing, we do have some suggestions for preparing for that. When you attend your hearing, please be prepared. Your argument should be provided in writing. You'll want to provide specifics as to why you disagree with the outcome of your refund claim. If you have additional documentation, you'll want to provide all of that at the hearing. However, upon request, time will be allowed after the hearing to submit additional information. The taxpayer has 60 days to appeal the final determination. After that 60 days, the refund is considered closed and final. We've prepared a listing of additional resources for your reference. The Ohio Revised Code sections that were covered in our presentation are listed here by tax type. We also want to remind you that on tax.ohio.gov, you can download copies of the various tax forms that we've discussed. There's also frequently asked questions for all of the tax types. In particular, there's frequently asked questions for the MNP tax. We do receive a lot of phone calls on that. We also have information releases that can be reviewed for additional information. We'd like to encourage you to subscribe to our tax alerts. Tax alerts are issued for all tax types that we process at the department, and they allow you to stay up to date on tax law. Okay. If you have any additional questions, you can always contact our taxpayer services line. We have about 5 minutes. Should we cover some questions? Do you want to start?
I'll read the first one here. So it says, why is a transaction listing required for a vendor-filed sales tax refund claim when an exemption certificate is later received by one of its customers? I think that one's you.
Sales and use tax, yes. In order to verify all of the invoices that are included within that refund claim, we do require a transaction listing that allows us to locate the exemption certificate in an original filing and verify that that exemption certificate was listed, paid for, and the sales tax was remitted. Okay. Can all refund claims be submitted on the gateway?
So currently, the only one that can be filed electronically on the gateway is commercial activity tax. None of the other taxes you can submit a refund claim electronically. Maybe in the future, but currently it's just commercial activity tax. So the next one here, when responding to an unrequested refund letter, must you also submit the STAR form?
The answer to that is no. If the taxpayer receives an unrequested refund letter, that does serve as a substitute for the STAR form. What are the requirements for claiming a tax credit?
So if you're claiming a tax credit, you're required to actually put it on the actual tax return, submit the credit schedule, CS form, and a copy of tax credit certificate from DSA. And then if it's the qualified research expense, it's Federal Form 67, 65, and then the address where the research is actually conducted. That would be the requirements for claiming a tax credit for the majority of the taxes that we covered. So the next one here, what if I'm registered as a MNP taxpayer with the Department of Taxation, but accidentally submit my payment to the municipality? So we've actually got quite a few of these. So if you've opted in with the Department of Taxation, but you submitted your payment still to the municipalities, you would need to request a refund from the municipality, and then you would also have to remit payment to the Department of Taxation. So that's how we're handling that process. The next one here, what is the statute of limitations for a refund claim? Do you want to answer that one?
Sure. For business taxes, the statute of limitation date is 4 years from the date of payment. The only exception to this is the MNP tax, which is 3 years from the date of the original payment.
So I'd like to add something to that. So for the MNP tax, the department won't issue refunds for anything that's $10 or less for that tax. The other taxes, if it's a dollar or less, we won't issue a refund. I'm not sure on sales tax. What's the sales tax?
A dollar.
Same for sales tax. I guess MNP is the only different one there, where it's got to be over $10 for us to issue a refund. So the next one here, so if I request a hearing when filing an appeal, must I come to Columbus to appear in person?
No, you can attend the hearing over the phone if that's more convenient for you.
And I think we've got time for one more. So what is the current interest rate?
The current interest rate is 4%, and in order to find a listing of our current and historical interest rates, you can go to our website, click on Researcher, and the interest rate schedule will be listed there for you. Okay, that concludes our presentation today. Again, if you have any questions about the refund process, feel free to reach out to Taxpayer Services or go online to our website at tax.ohio.gov. And Leah will conclude our presentation today.
Thank you. We hope you enjoyed the information provided today. I do have a few announcements that I would like to cover. The next OVTA will be Wednesday, November 14th. And at that time, the topics will include personal income tax, school district income tax, and employer withholding update, stock options and other personal income tax and pass-through entity legal updates, and also internet retail and sales and use tax. Please visit our OVTA webpage at tax.ohio.gov, as this is the #1 communication source for all OVTA information. We will also continue to work with different boards, chambers, and commissions to get that information out to you, as well as tax alerts. The second announcement has to do with code words. For those of you wishing to receive CLE and CPE credits, you will be required to submit the code words through a post-webinar survey. The survey will display once you exit the webinar. If for some reason it doesn't appear, you will receive an email later on today and you can submit the survey at that time. The last announcement has to do with evaluations. We do ask that each of you complete an evaluation. The link for the evaluation will also be included in the email that you received later today. It's important that you complete this evaluation as it allows us to work on areas of improvement, and we try to incorporate your feedback to make this an overall better viewing experience. This concludes today's OVTA. Thank you.